Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you again after a long gap. We are back with yet another episode on anthropology. And specifically speaking, we will discuss biological anthropology in some detail. But keep in mind, our anthropology optional is not just about biology per se, but it is about biological anthropology, where we emphasize more on the applications of these biological aspects to humans, to humanity, right? That's what anthropology is. It's a discipline of infinite curiosity about humans. So that's an important sort of a distinction to keep in mind. So a biology answer isn't necessarily a biological anthropology answer. And one more thing, most of the students probably think that biology portion is going to be taxing, it's going to be slightly challenging, but trust me, that is not the case at all. Biology is in fact quite easy, and in fact a lot of fun as well. And you yourself will realize this thing after watching these videos on the playlist. So in this playlist, we will start from the very basics and try to sort of help you build some interest and more importantly, help you build a strong foundation when it comes to biological anthropology. So without any further delay, let's get started. So many of you may have heard of Darwin, at least natural selection. If not natural selection, you must have heard of something called survival of the fittest. Okay, there is something called survival of the fittest. What it is, we'll try to take a look, we'll try to understand that. So see, first thing is Darwin actually went on, Darwin actually started off as a doctor. His father was, outside of London, his father had like one of the biggest practice of, of medicine. He comes from a very sort of a privileged sort of a background. However, when he was sent to go and study to become a doctor, he could not handle it. Okay, and he had to drop out. And you can't blame him. You had to do a lot of those surgeries. And even for me, I mean, surgeries and all of those things, maybe you have to be, it's not for the faint of heart, right? For the faint of hearts, it is very difficult. Okay, if you're going to be somebody who's going to have trouble, giving an injection or receiving an injection, you can imagine having to do surgeries. And during that period, they did not even have, what do you call that? Anesthesia. Okay, so in case you have to do blood transfusion, you have to like do stitches or something like that. It had to be, with that person, stuff like some sort of a cloth in that person's mouth so that, the screaming is not too much. Okay, that is how it was. So he sort of dropped out and then he tried to become like a bishop. Okay, so a lot of things, his life went in many different directions. Okay, nothing really clicked. But eventually he found this interest and he sort of started learning, like natural history or natural science and, those sort of things. And there he made some friends amongst the professors. He was starting to collect, like birds remains. Okay, some these kinds of things. And eventually he found a spot, with another person on going on a voyage. Okay, I mean, I'm not going to go into the entire details, but you must have heard of something called HMS Beagle. That was the famous ship that basically he traveled on for 5 years. Okay, they were basically like a naval expedition to sort of draw the maps. So he went on that particular expedition, and they will sort of pitch their tent in like some place, and stay there for a little bit. Okay, look at the land. He will look at the birds and the animals and the remains and the fossils and other things that sort of fascinated him. This is your Darwin. This is how he basically started. So he went on this particular journey. Now, if you look at this particular, so this, can you guys see this? What exactly is this? This is your South America. Okay, so this is your South America. Obviously, you do not want to be drawing South America like this, but that's fine. Okay, so this is your South America. So South America had one particular bird. Okay, it's called the finch, right? And from there, a few 600 miles or something like that away, you have a set of islands called Galapagos Islands. Okay, and here each of these islands are sort of different, and each of these islands, okay, somebody which is clear, okay, that it is a sort of a descendant of this particular finch from here. Okay, but they've all adapted differently. I think he came and picked up like around 13 of those sort of different kind of beaks, and he brought it to London. Brought it back to England, and then he was sort of like studying them. So basically what happened, 13 different environments, 13 different sort of evolutions have taken place. So for instance, in one place, it might be like, like a nectar, sort of like, you have a flower and then you have nectar. So you have to basically like, suck it out. So you need some different kind of a beak in comparison to something that will probably have to like, be like a woodpecker types, or something that has to like, eat insects, so all of those things will require different kinds of beaks. So he started noticing those. Okay, so let's take a look at what exactly he did. So again, where are we? Creationism ho gaya. Okay, the next thing was pre-Darwinism. We even criticized pre-Darwin and the problems therein. And now we are looking at Darwin. Okay, so this is an important book, Otus. Okay, on the origin of species by means of natural selection, or sometimes it is also given as On the Origin of Species, 1859. So Darwin says what? He basically argues that in terms of evolution, he says the same thing. In fact, spoiler alert, after all of these things, I'm going to say descent with modification. So the next generation with some modification, as simple as that. That's the whole thing. But how does he put it? See, all of these things, these are for your explanation, these are for your understanding. Just if you can understand it, that is more than enough. All of these things you will find in your peanut or whatever, okay? So it's not a big deal. It is difficult for you to, shove all of these things into your answer. Okay, but if you can shove all of these things in your brain so that you understand it better, that will be great. It goes in a logical way. Organisms produce more offspring than they can possibly survive. Again, if you start looking at, so look at these principles. Okay, if you look at some of the street dogs, you will notice, right? Initially, all of those these street dogs, they'll have like 6 puppies, 8 puppies. How many survive? Okay, you generally produce more than they are going to possibly survive. Okay, and amongst those, okay, there is going to be a struggle to survive. Okay, there'll be one puppy that is generally the smallest. It is probably not going to get enough time on the mother, okay, in order to drink the milk. Okay, and even in fact the other puppies will also sort of not allow this. Okay, and so basically not all of the puppies are going to look the same, meaning all the members of that particular species are not going to be the same. There are variations within. Some variations will be suited to the environment, some variations may not be suited to the environment. The ones that are best suited to that environment, they will survive, they will reproduce, and then they will pass on their genes to the next generation, whereas the ones that did not suit that particular environment will not. Does that sort of make sense? Very logical, right? So generally, you will produce a lot more than that is going to survive. Within the organisms that are there, they're all going to struggle to survive. So there will be sort of, there'll be a tussle between them. Okay, there are a lot of variations within the species. Some variations will be suitable for the environment. Some variations will not be suitable to the environment. Okay, the one that is suitable will sort of reproduce and pass on to the next generation. So the next generation will have more of those kind of things. So let us say it is a flower kind of an environment. What generally happens? You will have the ones that possibly have, the hummingbird, the long, thin, slender kind of a beak. You need this kind of a beak for flowers. Generally, flowers have 5 petals, right? Something like this. Okay, if you have, this kind of a beak, then it is great. Now, let us say if that environment requires you to go and, peck through this thick, let us say, tree. What happens? This is thin and slender. This will break immediately. What happens to a bird with a broken beak? It is not going to survive. It will die. So some sort of beaks are going to be suitable for that environment. Some sort of beaks are not going to be suitable for that environment. Hope that is clear. Okay. So those are the 5 principles. In terms of the struggle that we just talked about, okay, there are a few different types of struggle. Intraspecific or within the species. For instance, if it is fish, then all the sort of, what do you call them? Fishlings. I think that's what they're called. Okay. The ministry calls it like seeds. Okay, but anyways, or if it is like puppies, then it is the puppies. Okay, at the same time, you will also see a fight between 2 different species, okay, who are going to fight for the same sort of resource. Okay, so think about it in that particular manner. So for instance, let us say it's the ocean, and let us say there are 2 different kind of species of fish, and both of them feed on the same sort of a thing. Okay, let us say it is like some plant or something like that. So then both of them are going to struggle, okay, with each other. And there is also an environmental struggle, as in you against the environment. Okay, so organisms of different species, they'll struggle against the environment for what? There might be a flood, there might be a drought, whatever it is. Only those species that can adjust with that environment will be able to survive. Okay, so these are the many things, obviously, so that is that. So this is about struggle. What about variation? See, variation is a tendency of an organism to deviate from the parental generation, and that is sort of an important thing to take note of. You may look very much like your father, you may look very much like your mother, but do you look just like your father or just like your mother? Unless it is Bollywood, okay, and there is, what do you call that? Double actor, not double act. What do you call that? dual act, whatever it is. Okay. Apart from that, you generally don't see. You look like your father, you look like your mother. It is never the same. Why exactly? So there are many things that we have to understand, right? So every single generation will produce more and more sort of variations, and those variations can either be favorable or it may be unfavorable. Okay, so variations are going to be there. Some variations are going to be favorable, and some are going to be unfavorable. The favorable ones, they survive, pass on genes. Okay, this is the opposite. So it's very logical, right? So literally what happens here is in that favorable portions, this will increase in that population. So let us say this, okay, this is a favorable peak and this is a not so favorable peak. So what happens in the next generation, you will notice by the time this happens, you have many of these sort of peaks in the population, whereas this one will probably be quite less, maybe one. Okay, 1:3. Let us say there was 1:1 here eventually, but this one will keep decreasing, this one will keep increasing. Okay, that is your idea about variation. Now, amongst this variation, some will be the fittest. So the fittest here is what? What does fittest mean? Fittest means survive till reproduction. Okay, that is the whole thing, and pass on genes. So the idea that fittest means the strongest, the most aggressive, the baddest, so that is sort of incorrect. Fittest only means who can you survive. Okay, so the thin beak is not the strongest, it is not the aggressive, okay, none of that, but however it is best suited to that particular environment. So it is going to have the ability to survive till reproduction, and then it is, you know, in that reproduction way, you will notice that, you know, it is sort of in demand. Okay, it is sort of in demand, right? You can apply this to, you know, humans as well, right? There are some qualities in your in a person that is, you know, sort of more favorable. Okay, those people have more of a chance to, or there are more suitors for that particular thing. For instance, in India, basically it's arranged marriages. What do they start looking at? They'll probably look at skin tone, they will look at height, they will look at education, they will look at salary, they look at wealth, and I don't know what other thing they look at. Okay, so some genes are going to be, you know, better at surviving. Now let us say that some don't do so well. Okay, the education is sort of poor, or, you know, wealth is not there. You know, so many of those kind of issues are there. What happens? So they will have less, okay, so they're quote unquote less fit. Okay, so that is the whole thing. So again, to summarize, we are saying there is a struggle for existence. There is a struggle. Okay, and amongst this thing, we know that there are variations, and the best variations are going to, the fittest amongst them will survive. So survival of the fittest. Okay, this whole process is called your natural selection, and it's something that you would have heard of, seen, all of that, right? Okay, see if you can summarize this by yourself. Actually, I just summarized it here. Struggles and variation, survival of the fittest, all of these things put together is going to be a natural selection. Okay, so again, so what is your natural selection? Selection by nature. Selection by nature. Again, go back to that same example. Okay, selected by nature. So this is my nature. 3, 4, and 5. What is going to be the best here? This is going to be selected by nature. This guy is not going to be selected by nature because he'll struggle to find, you know, or to be able to take out nectar from here. Okay, so I hope that is clear. So the successful variations, you know, they sort of survive and they pass on their genes to the next generation. That is what he says. Okay, so eventually the accumulation of such advantages or favorable sort of traits in the subsequent generations, the future generations, is gradually going to bring changes in the species. That I can call it as evolution. That is what Darwin calls it, evolution. So successive generations in this way sort of tend to become more and more adapted to that particular environment. So as your environment keeps changing, right, you know, the variations will also, or, you know, the further adaptations will also keep occurring. Okay, I hope that is sort of clear. One way to represent this, okay, now this is one of the ways in which I represent it. Okay, this is not something that you will see in any book. What am I saying exactly? When you are doing this, again, you have to explain this well. Okay, so just take a look at this. Let us say I'm going from generation 1 to generation 100 or generation 1000. Okay, and in fact, I welcome you to try your own sort of unique ways of sort of expressing these. Okay, this has been, I mean, nobody generally has this thing, so this has been unique for me. In case you guys are good, because I know many of you are quite creative and you like to try new things, you can think about your own ways of going about this. So think about this. Let us say in one generation I have, let us say my capital T is a broad beak, something like this. Okay, and whereas my lower case t is this, and my environment is this. But in the first generation, it turns out, let us say that, we have just migrated from here. Okay, there are some variations, except for one small little change. That one person who's, let us say one person as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, let us say 1/6 of the population that has just migrated to this particular island where this is the environment, okay, has got a narrow beak, which is better suited to this particular sort of an environment in order to take out the nectar. But most of us are of this particular kind of a beak. What happens in subsequent generations? You will notice that slowly, the percentage of people or percentage of birds that have this kind of a beak, because it is better suited to this particular environment, their sort of population or percentage will keep increasing. And many generations later, you will notice that we have almost all of them who are best suited to this particular environment, that is this. So think about this. How did we start? We started and how are we ending after many generations? And one like this. So do you understand the population from here to here? If you notice, we can say there is gradual change because of natural selection. Hence, we can say evolution has occurred. So this table alone will not suffice. You have to sort of explain this. Okay. So does that sort of make sense? Is this very clear? Is everybody clear? Okay. Naveen, clear? Pooja?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Great. Harika? Wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Okay. So as simple as that. So now you understand what Darwin tried to say as well. Okay. So just think about this. Um, what we have just expressed, I've given you in picture, right? So if you look at this, for some of you, you may not be able to tell the difference between many of these beaks, but at least if you can see, this one looks a different kind of beak, this is kind of a different beak, this is kind of a different beak, so many different kinds of beak. Why so? Because all of them are from different islands, and each of these islands have different kind of an environment, and each of these environments will require different sort of a adaptation. And this is what our great Darwin, based on his sort of his voyage, has been able to study and has been able to document, and has provided sort of adequate proof to or evidence to sort of explain this. Okay, so that is that. So he was a young naturalist, just to summarize. Okay, he went on a voyage on this amazing famous sort of a ship called HMS Beagle. Okay, so in this particular ship he sailed around the world, and then somewhere in 1830s, I believe, it went to the islands in Atlantic Ocean. From your South America to Galapagos Island, many of these places on the coast of South America, they're trying to map it. And, after 5 years, he had collected many of these things, and net, this is the kind of understanding that, or this is the kind of thing that he has presented, all summarized here. Now, the important thing is, even here, while he got this idea in the 1830s, right, he actually got back in 1836, by the way, but still he had not published his book until 1859. You know why? Well, Darwin also got the idea. He was also sort of, not very keen to earn the wrath of the church. So what does he do? He waits. When the time is right, I will write. In fact, in terms of human evolution, he talks even a few decades later. So in this, he was actually going to write only because there is another person named Alfred Russel Wallace. He sent him an essay based on his sort of, he had done some similar kind of a work in Southeast Asia. He was doing some, collection of these sort of similar kind of a pieces for a museum. He came out with similar kind of an idea. So he sent Darwin this. So Darwin is like, oh no, I had this theory first, 20 years ago, and this is the proof, this is the documentation. Okay. And in fact, he publishes this particular thing. But however, jokes aside, he also gives credit to Alfred Russel Wallace, saying that this guy, even though I came out with the theory first, Alfred Russel Wallace also came out with this theory independently. Okay. So that is that. One of the most important concepts in entire anthropology is this. Okay, one of the most important ideas of anthropology is this. Note, write down this question. How Darwinism differs from Lamarckism? So this is your assignment. There are many different ways to write this, but one way to not write this particular answer is to write what is Darwinism and what is Lamarckism. That is not a good structure. The question is, how does it differ? So the question is not what is Darwinism, it is not what is Lamarckism, but how does theory A differ from theory B? So the entire emphasis should be on this. Okay. The reason why I'm mentioning this thing is that, scoring in anthropology is about your writing ability. And that too, writing what is asked. Okay. So what exactly is asked here? So this is your prime sort of this one. So for instance, one way to express this, maybe you guys can write it and I will tell you how to write this. Okay. If you can compare, so you don't want to compare apples and oranges. A clue. Okay. You don't want to compare apples and oranges. What do I mean by that? Explaining one theory with birds and another theory with giraffe. That need not be the best way. You can make it even better by sort of comparing apples to apples or oranges to oranges. That's all I will say. The rest of it is up to you, your creativity. Okay. So that is your Darwinism and Lamarckism, two most important theories. Creationism, you generally will not have to think about or write about or anything. If you look at this, I have done the same thing and I've extrapolated this to many generations. Okay, 1,000 generations, but I've given it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So 10% here and eventually 90% here. Okay, you can make this just like how I had given you in the previous slides, right? Keep it a smaller number. Okay, the point is not to make it too elaborate, but ensure that the explanation is solid. Okay, so that is what is sort of important. Okay, you can, I mean, again, you can explain this thing in n number of ways provided. So if I read this as an anthropologist and I feel like you have a proper understanding and appreciation, okay, I'm going to judge you based on your understanding and appreciation, not based on how much you have written or how much you have dumped in that paper. I don't care about how much you have studied. I care about your understanding and your appreciation. Each of you have a different way of showing your appreciation to that subject or your understanding of that subject. Okay, so try to explore what is your style. Okay, and bring it to me. I will try to help you. Hope you guys are finding a biological anthropology playlist useful for your preparation. Hope this video helped reinforce your basics and also helped you connect a little better with the applications. If there's any other aspect of anthropology that you would like to know more about, do let us know in the comment section and we will try to make videos on those as well. Thank you for watching and we will see you in the next video.